Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be drawing three D&D monsters together. These are the Glabrizu, an orange crab-like demon, a death slaad, a grey toad creature, and an ettin, which is a two-headed giant. The first thing I did for this design was I decided just to very loosely bulk in the features I wanted this creature to have. The claws from the Glabrizu, the posture of the ettin and death slaad, the death slaad's head, the ettin's two heads, and lots of these different features, maybe the shoulder pads of the Glabrizu. And this stage is very much just a bashing together of lots of different ideas that I'm just going to refine over the design process. For a slightly more refined sketch, I basically draw a more hulking figure of the death slaad, because both the Glabrizu and the ettin are quite hulking and quite muscly, because one's a giant and one's just a muscly demon. And I felt that these muscles definitely worked on the death slaad's body structure, so that's how I made that. I'm trying out more ideas, like the shoulder pads again. I try them multiple times, but in the end I just decide that they're not working, and I decide to do them again. I do them in a different place, not on the shoulders, because how the head was arranged for the death slaad, it didn't really work. I was going to have all four arms be claws, but then I decided just to have the front two as claws, because I found that this was much more cohesive design instead of just having claws. This wouldn't really be plausible for something as big as this to have claws, though it is kind of a demon, so it doesn't really matter if it's plausible or not. When I'm going into this much more refined stage, this is either my second or third to last sketch. This is getting all of the ideas into one cohesive design so that I can then sketch over that much more, or draw over that in a much more polished way for the final line art. So this is me collating all the ideas into a finished design. You can see I'm making sure that this creature has very muscular shoulders and biceps and forearms, even though the forearms are going to then be created into the claws on the forearms. They're going to have very large, this is where I put in the shoulder pads of the Glabrizu. This is how I added that feature in onto the forearms. I'm going to the more refined stage, going into the final sketch of this creature, so I'm making sure to detail out all of the spikes, all of the wrinkles, the jawline, the teeth, all of these different things to make sure that it is polished and smooth, so that when I go over this in colour, it looks like a proper creature and a very nice line art, a very clean creature and line art. I feel like I went slightly too thick on the lower half of the body, and it kind of makes it look slightly cartoon-like, how it's not very detailed and it's also got quite thick lines. And if I did this again, I would add more detail to the lower half of the body, because I feel like compared to the top half where it's quite clustered, quite heavy with detail, like the spikes in their faces and the arms, they're just so laden with detail. I think I should have added something to the bottom to try and balance out this detail, so it's not like the lower half of the body is kind of underwhelming. For the colouring, I start with the claws. I was going to do these, I was thinking of doing it in orange, but I eventually go with a darker purple to have the more death slaad, very dark, very black, very evil colours coming through, because orange is a very joyful colour, whereas purple can be very mysterious and very evil. The body is going to be all grey like the death slaad, but I decided to have the highlights, or not the highlights, I decided to have some of the extra places of detail, like the claws and the spikes, to be purple, because I still wanted to contain in this design the Glabrizu's saturation, where it's such a saturated colour for a demon. I felt that I should carry that over into the colouring of this creature. I build up lots of highlights, lots of dark tones and I start to smooth them out, and as I go I smooth them out less and less, so there is much more of a distinction between dark, middle and light. I find that this is a very good way to do it. Build up with a very flat tone, go in with darks, smooth them out almost completely, and just build up layers like that. It becomes more of a smooth transition, but there is much more depth. For the rest of the body, I went in and I just selected around the entire thing, so that as you can see here, I could look at the body as a whole, trying to look at the death slaad as an example for where highlights and shadow would go, but mainly just thinking in my head, where would the light hit and where would it not hit. Also using the lights and the darks as variation in the skin texture instead of just dark and light shadows. As you see with the wrinkles, just add some more texture to the necks so they are encompassed in the detail. I smooth out wrinkles and then I add in more depth, more dark grey. And now I go into the bottom, adding in the highlights there. I usually do highlights before I do darks, so that I don't let the piece get too dark before I put in the highlights, because otherwise I find with my drawings that sometimes I can go much darker than I should, or much darker than I want to if I just do the darks first, because I have nothing to contrast this. Because if I do the darks first, then I have to make the lights much lighter and cover more of the body, and I don't really like how that turns out. As you can see, I was adding some saturation in the greys with a little bit of purple in the darks, but mainly it was just grey, maybe a slight bit of brown in there. But I make sure that the legs are much darker, especially the back leg, because that pushes it back and aids in the proportioning of this creature. However from the proportion, it looks like one leg is further back than the other because it's smaller. If you make that leg darker as well, it makes the whole piece go together and pushes the bits you want at the further back, and the bits you want further forward. If they're light, it brings them to the front. I think this worked well with this piece and showed how it was lumbering forwards using its front legs for stability as much as its back legs. Then I go over all of the spikes. I found that the spikes on this could have been better, especially on the right head as we're looking at it. I feel like the dark didn't really, it kind of stopped being as dark and just blended into the skin tone. So if I was going to touch up this creature or do it again, I'd make sure that the spikes were dark and not blending in with the creature. As you can see here on some of the exposed parts of the upper arms, I did make sure to have some detail into them so that to break up the smoothness of the skin and to add the texture that a toad's skin would. Going around in the eyes, I made sure to have them dark and quite a very dark blue, so that you can't really see into them. They just look dead. Then going to the mouth, I made the back of the mouth a very dark velvety red, and then the gum and the teeth are much brighter red and white respectively, to make them pop out of this very unsaturated creature. And that's how this design turned out. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to tell me in the comments down below what other universes you think I could fuse monsters from, for example Yu-Gi-Oh, or Pokemon, or Monster Hunter, or anything else you can think. And until next time, have a great day.